Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Inside the Birds TV with Jeff Mosher and Adam Kaplan, presented, of course, by Draftking Sportsbook. And I don't know, for the second week in a row on ITB TV, it's sort of like a bittersweet show because we're really happy. The sweet part is bringing on a guy like Paul Domowitch, who is just a wealth of football knowledge and experience, and 39 years of covering pro football, among other things, as a journalist, but bitter because he's leaving. He announced that last week. He's on to the next chapter of his life, and we know there's going to be a lot of turnover in the Philadelphia media. There has been over the last few years, but even more so now with guys like Paul and Les leaving. So, Paul, first of all, thanks for joining us on ITB TV. Just from my own personal standpoint, as a young writer coming up, you were someone I would read all the time, watch how you went about work, true professional, helped me out a lot. So I have a lot of thank yous to you. I'm very sad that you're leaving, but I'm happy for you. But a lot of thank yous just for being who you are.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that.
Sure. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I just want to say, Damo, getting to know you over the years, your storytelling, some of the stories that you've been through, they're almost hard to believe. The Combine stories, the Al Davis stories, you're one of the few people who could say, I was at the Combine or whatever the media was allowed to deal with several decades ago when we didn't even know what the Combine was as young people growing up. So cannot wait to talk about some of your great stories.
Yeah, first Combine I was at was actually the first one in Indianapolis. Paul Palmer was part of that Combine group, which was like somewhere around 86, I want to say.
Wow, 1986. And how many reporters at that time were at the Combine?
Actually, the first one, I think there was only me and the local guy. For many years early on, there probably was about 6 of us because, I mean, the league did not want reporters there. The people that ran the Combine, that ran ran those things just thought we were the enemy. It took a while before someone in the league, a light went on, and they said, "Hey, we can make this an event." And by last year, or by the last time, 2 years ago, when no, I guess we had it last year, right before the pandemic broke.
Yeah,
yep. There were probably 1,500 media credentials issued. So it's changed a lot over the years.
The local guy, whoever was, I guess, for the Indianapolis Star, must have looked at you and thought, what in the world are you doing here?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, you go back far enough. I mean, back to the days of Dick Vermeil when he was here. I mean, their way of working out people, they often had players running in the hallways of hotels to get their 40 time. They finally, at some point, I think New Orleans was the first place they held an official Combine. Then it was there for about a year or two, and then they moved it to Indy in the mid '80s.
Did you notice, Damo, when you would go to the Combine in the late '80s, early '90s, and through the 2000s? Jeff and I we've talked about this before. Like, our access has changed. Whereas when I first started covering the league in 2001, and then my first Combine was 2002. At that Combine in 2002, there might have been 150 people. You just talked about 1,500. But when you were first covering it, did you notice you could pretty much get anyone? Now, I know that you said that the challenges were a little different because the league didn't want any reporters there. But when you got people, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, your conversations might be actually pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, coaches and scouts, you could get them at the bar at night. The main place to get players at the time was where they were staying and being interviewed, which was the Holiday Inn Union Station, which is right next to what is now the field. What do they call it? Forget the name of it.
Where the Pacers play. Yeah.
But we would be staying there, so there'd be about a half dozen to dozen to the number grew to maybe 20 at one point in the lobby there. And I mean, they so did not want us there that they would take away the chairs. We would be basically standing the whole time or sitting, but slowly but surely a player would come in with his agent. The agent understood that it was a good thing for the player to talk to the media. So, we would get them off to the side, and because there were so few of us, interviews were terrific. I mean, not much better than they are, last few years when you've got a crowd of hundreds around a guy, and there's a clock on him, and he's been rehearsed to say what he's going to tell you, because that's what he's, that's what he spent his pre-draft training doing, either, learning how to run the 40 and all the drills, or how to talk to teams and how to talk to the media.
Well, see, this is your fault, Damo. You would go, you would write about it. People thought it was a good idea. And then you started this craze of reporters going to the combine to get the access. And now it's completely changed and you're leaving the industry, but we have you to blame. No.
Well, it's funny, Jeff, back then, the way we would cover it, I mean, this is long before the internet. You'd go there and you basically put everything in your notebook. You didn't write live because you were just trying to get players that you weren't going to be able to get, or coaches or scouts that you weren't going to be able to get down the line closer to the draft, so that you could do draft stories. So, I mean, you'd pocket everything, go back to your city, and then at some point write a story on a guy.
Yeah, it's crazy how much that's changed.
Yeah.
Damo, please regale us here with one of your stories. Al Davis, probably early 90s owners meetings. Maybe, again, I'm dating it. You would know better, because I remember you going into some of these stories. Give us sort of an idea what it was like to cover him at these owners meetings, and just the owners meetings throughout the decades, and the unique part about of your career with that.
Yeah, Adam, and you've been to so many of them too. You've seen how access changes, how the owner's approach to the media has changed. Back then, I remember Al, at the end of every owners meeting, the day it was over, he would hold he'd go into a room, and he'd sit there, not in an official setting. He'd be sometimes sitting on a bench or a podium, or on one of those things that a riser, and you just stand there and ask him questions for an hour. And and he'd be outrageous, some great stories to write, because Al said what he felt, and so that was always terrific. That obviously has changed a lot since then. I mean, now owners are behind ropes. I mean, there used to be a time when, hell, you'd get Jerry Jones on the way out when he's going for a bathroom break, and it would turn into a 20-minute Q&A. So things have changed a lot.
Have you ever been in the Jerry Jones? Sorry, have you ever been in the Jerry Jones trailer?
I have never been in the bus.
In the bus, yeah, the big, huge bus. Yeah,
I passed it probably 150 times over the years, and I always wanted to. They used it to play cards, besides to talk to players in there occasionally. But I mean, most of those interviews were formal and inside the building where the players would be interviewed. But they'd use that as kind of a place to get crazy.
Definitely. Adam, have you been in it? Have you wandered in?
No, I've passed it. I don't know how many times at the combine.
Mm-hmm.
You always wonder what was going on in there. Who knew? Look, they did a lot of business. I mean, agents, you see, get business deals in there.
Yeah.
I would always laugh though. It would Damo, you know this too. They would park it sometimes close to Steak and Shake downtown Indy for the combine.
Right.
you always there, loud, big Cowboys. That's Jerry Jones.
Yes. Yeah. So for those who don't know, who are watching, Jerry Jones and the Cowboys travel to I think they do it to the owners' meetings too, or do they fly? Is it just the combine that they bring their bus?
If I had, it's well, the only place I've seen it is at the combine,
right.
and they don't drive it. And somebody drives it up there.
Of course. No, they're not driving, but it is. Yeah, it's like the Madden Cruiser, but even bigger and gaudier and cowboyed up. I mean, Dallas Cowboy logos and everything. Where the Dallas Cowboys are at the combine and where Jerry Jones is based on where this thing is parked. So it's always kind of the highlight of the combine. All right, download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use the promo code ITB to turn $1 into $100 in free credits. That's $1 into $100 in free credits using the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app and that promo code ITB. So, Damo, I mean, 39 years of doing what you do. There's so many great stories, so many wonderful characters along the way, and then not just us beat writers, but guys that you've also interviewed. Who stands out? I mean, when you're saying goodbye at a time where you've got like a library of guys you've interviewed of all different levels, but give me some of your favorite characters in the game that you've covered.
Well, I can start with Asante.
I was going to not go right into Asante, but go for it.
Yeah, it's funny with Asante. My first few encounters with Asante were not very friendly. I mean, he was a pain in the ass in the locker room. You're trying to interview somebody, and Asante's butting in and just being a complete nuisance. And so there were a couple times there where I told him to get lost, and he would just continue to stand there. And so we got into it a few times, and then shortly thereafter, he found out I was the Hall of Fame voter in Philadelphia, and I went from a guy he'd like to annoy to his best friend. I mean, every time I walked into the locker room, it was, "Hey, Domowitch." One time after he left the Eagles and was playing in Atlanta, his first training camp down there, I remember because it was the same day as Garrett Reid died. I was in Atlanta to do a story on Asante down there, and they were out on the field at training camp, and I'm walking. I don't know if either one of you guys have been down to the Falcons training camp in the Flowery Branch. But so you're walking out the door, out towards the field, so the players can see you from a ways away. I mean, I must have been 100 yards away, and Asante recognizes me, and it's like, Domowitch. It was like his mother had just showed up. I mean, it was just he's hollering my name in the middle of drills. I think Jim Moore was a coach then. He's like, "What the hell?" So I hated the way he played from the standpoint of his reluctance to tackle. I mean, he was one of the terrific instinctive cover guys that ever played the game, but that just drove me nuts, and I constantly criticized him for that, and that's kind of why he was on me until he realized I was a Hall of Fame voter. But I remember the time I once had to tell him, I said, Asante, this was like maybe his last year with the Eagles, the year before that. He's asking, "You think I got a chance? Do you think I got a chance to make the Hall?" I said, your numbers are just not quite there. I said, you need about 10 more interceptions, pass some people, and I think, then it's doable. And he was just heartbroken. I mean, it was like I had just told him he had 5 months to live.
Damo, you've covered so many head coaches here with the Eagles, and I've talked to our friend Ruben Frank about Buddy Ryan over the years. What was your relationship with Buddy Ryan and covering for the time he was here in Philly?
I didn't much care for Buddy. I thought he was, a phony. The players loved him, but he was just, I mean, I didn't, he berated players that he knew he had no need for. We can go back to Kevin Allen, the first round pick back in '85. I think a year or two into Allen's unfortunate tenure with the Eagles before he went to prison, somebody asked Buddy at training camp or a mini camp about him, and he said, "He's a good guy if you need somebody to stand around and kill grass." Can you imagine a coach in today's game saying that about a player?
Remember Matt Patchen? Damo, remember Matt Patchen?
Yeah.
And he was a guy. What did he say? He had some funny line. I don't know what it was. It was just so like, what? You never knew with him. Like, and the thing is, you guys both know this. Buddy Ryan became a legend in Philly for never winning a playoff game. It's just remarkable. Absolutely remarkable.
It is remarkable, especially in a town that, values winning something in the playoffs and titles as much as Philadelphia does.
Buddy's, I mean, his fame in Philadelphia it's almost like, the MAGA bunch. You just can't understand how they became so obsessed with him, man. I mean, Buddy would have a weekly radio show back then when he came to town at Ribbit, the Ribbit restaurant, and I mean, it'd be standing room only out the door waiting to get in, just because that's how popular he was. And he would just abuse people. I mean, and they didn't care. I mean, he would insult them, and there's a couple stories in the book I wrote with Leo Carlin about him. Leo took him to St. Joe's Prep for a booster club meeting. Leo's kids had played football there, and Buddy reluctantly agreed to go. and he drives Buddy over there, and somehow Buddy smuggled a bottle of whiskey into the car, and was like drinking it on the way over. And Leo's like, "Don't ever get in my car with a bottle of liquor again." And like, didn't say anything, just ignored him. Anyway, I thought he was one of the greatest defensive coaches the league's ever seen. Sure. Had no use for offense. He thought you could win just with defense, and he had one of the greatest defenses probably in the history of this league. And but couldn't get over the hump because he just because of his shortcomings in developing Randall and other problems they had on the including an offensive line that he could never. He thought you could just take a defensive lineman who wasn't good enough to play on defense, turn him into an offensive tackle or an offensive guard, and he'd be great there. And that obviously, as we know over the years, is not the case.
No, yeah, definitely. Real quick, back to Asante, a funny story that I don't know if I ever told you, but I was doing a one-on-one interview with Asante right at Lehigh going into his second year as an Eagle. So he had just had a pretty good first year as an Eagle, had a couple of picks and was feeling good about himself. And so I was doing that story about him, entering year two. And the topic, he was so effusive in his praise for Andy Reid because he felt like he could be himself. And that's really what the story was about, how he felt in New England. They hated his personality. They didn't let him talk. They didn't let him be him. He felt Belichick had a personal vendetta against him and wouldn't even sell his jersey. I actually had to call Stacey James from the Patriots, their PR guy, and very rarely do people do this. I had to fact check this Asante because he said they stopped selling his jersey in the team store, which the Patriots assured me was absolutely incorrect and very in line with Asante to say something that wasn't true. But nonetheless, it was a good interview. And in that interview, he starts talking about wanting to be in the Hall of Fame so badly and how he's got the stats. And Derek Boyko, who's the PR guy for the Eagles at the time, is there. And I remember Asante looks over at Boyko and he goes, "Who has the Hall of Fame vote in Philly?" And Boyko goes, "Oh, it's Paul Domowitch." Yeah. And the look on Asante's face, because as you mentioned, he became your best friend after that, after giving you, crap for all this. And the look on his face was like, and then literally the next day we're at Lehigh, he comes out. It's the first time I remember him going, "Hey, Damo, what's up, buddy?" So I was there for the start of the transformation, man.
I've never seen a player who that from the beginning of his career making the Hall of Fame was that important to him. I mean, late in your career when you've got numbers and stuff, a lot of guys are like, even if they don't mention it as openly as he did, it's a goal of theirs with Asante from day one. And, he every year, I don't know how many votes he gets, because we have to reduce a number from a preliminary list of about 125 names down to 25. And they never tell us, who got this many votes, who finished 30th. I'm sure he's gotten a lot of votes. I think he belongs in the discussion of 20 of the 25 guys because of his numbers and because of the way he played, even if he didn't tackle. But my situation is I've been trying for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years now to get Eric Allen in the Hall of Fame, and I can't get them to pay attention to a guy who should be a no-brainer. And so, if the day ever comes when I do get him in, then I'll move on to Asante.
Are you, by the way, are you still going to be the Philadelphia representative for the Hall of Fame voting?
Yeah.
Okay.
For a while at least. I'm still going to do freelance for the Daily News, for the Inquirer Daily News. Still going to do some other work. So enough that I'll probably end up doing enough to stay as a selector.
And for those, real quick, Adam, for those who don't know, and I know we've talked about it, but Paul has been, for a while, was a big advocate of Terrell Owens getting into the Hall of Fame. So I know that the writers themselves, the collective group, get a lot of backlash from the fans because it took so long for T.O. But if I'm not mistaken, Paul, you were for quite a while in favor of T.O. making the Hall of Fame, right? So the backlash shouldn't be for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, when he became eligible, I kind of thought it was going to be a no-brainer. I mean, you look at Owens' numbers, and they're just phenomenal. They're Hall of Fame worthy. And then I remember the meeting we had right before we started discussing. He was a finalist, and for some reason, one of the people from the Hall of Fame decided to mention, and I'm not one of the selectors, but one of the people that one of the people that run the league, the Hall of Fame, mentioned that a player, they were discussing what on the field and off the field meant, like drugs, stuff like that we can't consider. But for some reason, he decided to make a point of the fact that you could consider the fact that this guy was a disruption in some locker rooms, which obviously he was, including here in Philadelphia. And so that's kind of what kept him out the first. I think he made it his third year maybe. Mm-hmm. Finally, we broke people down and realized and said this is just not fair. I mean, even in Philadelphia, you can knock what he did in 2005 when he basically ran himself out of town. But I mean, the man played 7 weeks after tearing up his leg in the Super Bowl. He plays in the Super Bowl and catches 9 passes. I mean, there were just everything you could say negative about him, you could find a positive. I mean, and plus he was just a great player. And regardless of the trouble he caused in some places like Dallas and Philadelphia, it wasn't enough to keep him out of the Hall of Fame. And I'm glad, most of the other people felt that way eventually.
So Dama, we had a chance to talk to Les Bowen recently about his career, but the thing that I really found fascinating is his view of covering the Eagles in 2017, that surprising Super Bowl run that they had. What was that like for you as a long tenured writer and covering the Eagles for so many decades here? What was that situation like for you covering the team in 17?
It's a weird season, as you guys know. I mean, it went so fast during the regular season because they got on a run where they seemed unbeatable. And it just was suddenly it was, we're in the Coliseum in LA and they're looking like a team that's going to walk to the Super Bowl. And then, Carson goes down and then suddenly it's like, okay, they're going to make the playoffs, obviously, but this team's going nowhere. And next thing you know, Nick, it took Nick Foles a few weeks, but once the playoffs started, he was, it's one of the most incredible things I've ever seen because he's been nothing close to that ever since and wasn't anything close to that before that, unless you go back to 2014 or whatever it is, the year he had 7 touchdown passes against the Raiders when he was still with Philly. But I mean, it was like a magic. I've never covered anything like that from the standpoint of like, you think that it's just lightning in a bottle. I mean, it was, they're playing with, without Jason Peters and other people hurt, and then they get to the playoffs and it's just like magical. Like Corey Clement is making catches in the end zone that he's never made again in his life. It was just amazing. I've got 2 memories of that Super Bowl. One is I was sick as a dog. There was a stomach flu going around out there. I first surfaced like the day before. A couple of guys I knew were down, and I was fine until the game started, and I'm up in the press box and starting to get sick. So I ended up. We go down. My assignment was to do Brandon Graham, who made that incredible sack that saved the game. And, we're down in that, that area, how they interview players. It's just a cluster, and I knew I was probably not, I'm trying to hold out as long as possible to get my quotes from him without throwing up. And I end up running into a corner to throw up, come back, finish talking to Brandon, go upstairs, got sick again, went into the bathroom. It was just a mess. But I mean, I filed. So there was, there was that, and the weather out. I mean, Minnesota. You guys remember Minnesota? It's just crazy. But it was, it was one of those Super Bowls you'll never forget. I mean, a lot of the Super Bowls I've covered. I'm not Ray Didinger. I can't remember fourth quarter of Super Bowl 6. I mean, they all run together for me. I remember more off the field stuff at Super Bowls or flights or something like that than I do the actual games. But the 2 Eagles games, obviously, because I was covering the team, I remember so much of those and so much of what happened. So anyway.
Well, that was definitely a special season. Les said the same thing, that it felt like it went by so fast, probably because none of us expected it. So when you're in the moment, you're still not sure. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
You know, and then
you even throw in, I mean, you get to the Atlanta playoff game. I mean, they shouldn't have won that. I mean, Julio Jones lets the ball go right through his hands.
I know.
Crazy.
All the crazy things that happen.
Yeah.
All right, let's tell our friends to stop being a loser and paying full retail price for the things that they want. Just get on Deal Dash, okay? When you register, you use the promo code ITB. You'll get a special offer for some bonus free bids. That's our friends at Deal Dash. Download the app or go to dealdash.com. So, of course, for as long as you've covered sports, and you started off as a baseball writer in Texas, right? Is that really you're from Wilkes-Barre, if I'm not mistaken, though, right?
Right. And my last I went to from Wilkes-Barre. I graduated. Went to Midland, Texas, out in West Texas, because I could not find a job out of college. They wanted people with experience. The papers were big time union back then. It was tough for a young kid to find a job. So I ended up finding 140 a week. Went down to West Texas and worked in Midland. I got there before Buzz Bissinger went down there to do the Friday Night Lights book in next door in Odessa. But it was like it was a great place to be. My first boss there, I'm actually supposed to talk to him on Zoom today. He's like 98 years old, still alive. So wow. that was very instructive. I was only there like a year and a half, and then went to Fort Worth. Met my wife there. So if nothing else, there was that's why it was memorable. But covered baseball the last 2 years of my 4-year stint in Fort Worth.
So you covered the Texas Rangers for 2 years.
Yeah.
Right. And then you came right up to Philadelphia after that?
Yeah. Came up. Actually, my first beat was boxing.
Oh, wow.
Really? The opening kind of came about. There was some movement. Guy named Bud Shaw, I don't know if you remember Bud, was the Eagles writer. And he left to go to San Diego to take a job as a columnist. And Rich Hoffman, who was preceded in retirement, went from boxing to the Eagles, and so I went up there with the they said, well, we're gonna put you on boxing, which I had never covered before, for a little bit, and then we'll see what happens. We'll put you, it's not gonna be forever. Ended up being for about 6-8 months. That's when the USFL came about, and from the USFL to the NFL to retirement.
What is your takeaway from 38 years in the business as far as just being a beat writer, the relationships, with either writers or athletes that you've covered? I mean, you're stepping away now, and it probably won't be the same. So what is your takeaway from it?
It's never felt like a job, Jeff. I've enjoyed every. There have been obviously some things that are frustrating in this business, dealing with people. Things that don't, happen that you wanted to happen, but I have no regrets at all. It's been a great 39 years. Most of the players I've dealt with over those 39 years have been tremendous people. I mean, I go down, the list is too long to name all the guys that you deal with. Zach Ertz, who's just like unbelievable. Guys like that. Randall Cunningham was great. Randall, the thing with Randall was, you could talk to Randall for 20 minutes and have a great story, but and then somebody else would be coming over, and you were afraid to walk away because Randall would tell a totally different story to the next guy. It'd be like 2 stories in the papers the next day, and you didn't know which one. But then, Randall wasn't lying. He just kind of like rambled on to the point where sometimes the whole story would change. So, but I enjoyed him. He was a big guy to cover. He was one of the most talented guys I've ever covered. I wish he and the people around him, including Buddy, would have developed him into the player he could have been, and he'd be in the Hall of Fame. So I've enjoyed the relationships I've had with a lot of players and coaches. Dealing with Andy was I know a lot of people rip on Andy. You covered him, Jeff. He wasn't the most quotable guy in the world, but I had a pretty good relationship with him. He never lied to me that I can remember. might not have filled up my notebook, but at least I knew he was pointing me in the right direction. You don't get that now. I mean, even with Doug, Doug had his own agenda. And while he, was open enough to reporters, you didn't know whether what he was telling you was the truth or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, at least Andy, his non-quotable way, did give you one of your infamous columns for a couple of years, or the "What Andy Said, What Andy Meant" column that I always looked forward to on Tuesday morning after his Monday press conference.
I love that. I wish when I stopped doing that, I really missed it, because that was fun. It was, not many times, and he got a kick out of it. He thought it was something. You would think this guy's, probably gonna have one of the PR guys like breathing down my neck, telling me stop that. He loved it. He thought, because he appreciated humor.
They never. So none of the PR people, when you would evaluate what he was saying, never once said to you, "Hey, I don't think you're right with that." They never said that.
I'm trying to think. Derek was the PR guy, I guess, for most of all that. No, not Derek.
Wow, that's good.
Good word about it.
Never crossed the line with a cheeseburger quip or anything like that.
I try not to be. I tried never to be mean. I mean,
right.
And besides the cheeseburger thing, he thought was, he always was self-deprecating when it came to fat jokes or food jokes. I mean, he's the one that kind of made the whole cheeseburger line famous when he started telling about how he'd have, give his players cheeseburgers on Saturday night before games.
That's right. That's right. All right. We have one more question for you. Before that, I just want to remind our listeners to check out our friends at Sky Motor Cars. You can go to their website, skymotorcars.com, or just go see them in Westchester. Tell them Adam and Jeff sent you. You'll get a great deal. Paul, you mentioned covering the USFL when you came up here to Philly, back from Texas, and you're writing a book about Sam Mills, correct? When is that due, and what's going to be the topic of the book?
Well, it's going to be a bio on Sam. I haven't even started it yet. I'm going to start it once my last day is September 1 with the Inquirer. Then I'm going to get into that in earnest. I've got a lot of stuff already from over the years on Sam. He's the most inspirational player I've ever covered. I mean, this is a guy 5'0" who was cut by the Toronto Argonauts cut him because he was too small. Sam Bertigliano, when he was the Browns head coach back in '82, cut him after the kid had a terrific career at Montclair State, was All-American, but nobody believed that a player that small could play pro ball. And even when he basically went back to his college in Long Branch, his high school in Long Branch, New Jersey, to teach black and white photography. When the Philadelphia Stars called him and said, "Hey, come on down for a tryout for this new spring league," and he was initially not going to do it, and he did. And then it's kind of like the rest is history type of deal. I mean, he becomes the best player in the history of that short-lived league. He goes to the Saints and Panthers. They've got 6 Pro Bowls, I believe. He's got a statue of himself that they built of him in front of Carolina's stadium. They still and such a tragic ending. 46 years old and dies of cancer. It's just an overwhelming story that I've wanted to write for a long time. It's kind of like was one of the things. I'd initially planned on working till I was staying at the Inquirer till I was 70. When the buyout came about and the writing was kind of on the wall as far as, they were in the herd, so to speak. So I realized that, don't put it off anymore. I could have stayed on and probably survived another year or two. And I thought now is a good time to go out and start this book. So that's kind of the roots of it.
Well, we're definitely going to miss you, Paul. It's been great to read your work over the years and to learn from you. You're one of the best. You're a legend. We appreciate you coming on, and maybe hopefully when your book does come out, you'll come back on, talk about it with us here on Inside the Birds. And we wish you the best. It's I don't feel like we're saying goodbye. I know we'll see you, but it is, like I said, it's bittersweet. But thanks for everything that you've done for our industry.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Two of you are two of the people that I've really enjoyed working with over the years.
Thank you. All right. Our thanks to our friends at DraftKings, at Deal Dash, at Sky Motor Cars. Of course, thanks to Paul Domowitch for being on the show. For Adam Kaplan and Paul, I'm Jeff Mosher, and you've been watching Inside the Birds TV.